All right, I'm sorry, there was some technical glitch. Yeah, so the first question that you might be thinking is what exactly is this 9-box grid? So 9-box grid is one of the performance management tools which is used by organizations to track their talent. By tracking their talent, I mean tracking where and how the employees of the organization are doing. Yeah, on their performance as well as potential. Now, the next question that you might be thinking is why do organizations need to, track their talent? To answer to that, let's move on to the next slide. So the first reason is superior talent is up to 8 times more productive than the rest. And this is not something that I am saying. This research has been taken from a McKinsey. So in order to identify what all people or who are these employees who comprise or who make up the superior talent in our organization or in anybody's organization, we need to use a tool for it, right? And that's where the 9-box grid comes into play. The next reason is great talent is scarce. And the last one is most companies don't get it right. In fact, a whooping 82% of employees don't believe that they're recruiting the right talent. Now, 9-box grid has been, one of the most important tools that organizations have been using to manage their talent. And this is what the 9-box grid looks like. So 9-box grid is nothing but the placement of the employees of an organization on, let's say, an X and Y axis, where the on X axis we plot the performance, while on the Y axis we plot the potential. Right now, let me take you to how do we actually use this tool. So the first thing that a company has to do is decide on the parameters that they want to evaluate their employees on. For example, here you see that we have two parameters, that is performance and potential, but this is further divided into specific parameters that a company tracks, which obviously in the course of this session you'll get to know. And then the second is to collect data, and data collection, having so this is I'm currently in my summer internship, and having worked with organizations closely, I've realized that the collection of data is actually a very difficult step, because now I'll tell you why. And that is because this is the step where a data gets most of its errors. Now I'll tell you why that is. And that is because just imagine there's this one sheet of employees where there are, let's say, 5 columns: employee ID, employee name. There, let's just take the 2 parameters that we can see on the screen, that is the performance and the potential. Now this sheet will be filled by the leaders of the organization, and there can be multiple leaders, right? So this information can be filled in 2 ways. One is the same sheet is circulated to the different leaders, and the second is they all make their different files, and then that's combined into one. Now, the problem with this is, let's say I am one of those leaders, and let's say I want to fill the names of my employees in all uppercase, while another leader in my organization chooses to do it in a lower case. But when I combine the 2 files, the entire data set is not going to be uniform, which is going to create a challenge for the data analyst who has to further analyze the data, right? So yes, so after the data is collected, so after the data is collected, there is an average score for performance as well as potential that is calculated. And then they're plotted, and then all the employees are plotted on the X and Y axis as is visible on the screen. Now, without further ado, let's move on to the data set that we'll be working on today. Just give me a moment. I'll open the data set. All right, I hope my screen is visible. Can I get a heads up if the screen is visible? Okay, thanks, Advait. Right, so this is the data set that we'll be working on. This is a real business data set, but obviously with representative numbers. Let's just look at what this data set comprises of. The first column, as you see, is the external ID. Then we have the employee name, gender, the manager name, the manager ID, then the designation. This is the designation of the employee. Then we have the department, the date of birth, and the date of joining. There are other files that we've got as well. That is, one is for potential. So in this file, we have the potential of all the employees tracked, and this organization is tracking potential on 4 parameters. And that is, if you look at the column names, that is, just a second, that is ability, aspiration, alignment, and agility. Let's look at the one folder that we haven't opened, and that is the performance of the employees. So in the performance folder, we have 3 different files. That is the performance of 2021, 22, and 23. Let's open one of these files to check what it contains. So here we see that we have the IDs of the employees and the performance of that particular year. Cool. So I guess we're ready to start working on the data set. So we'll be working on Power BI. Let me just open Power BI. All right. So we'll start by first loading the data set onto Power BI. So to do that, we go to Get Data, go to Excel Workbook, since we saw that our files are in Excel Workbook. Also, you just want to make sure that while you're loading the files should not be open, because then you will not be able to load it to Power BI. So we'll start with the HR employee raw data. We'll open the data. Now we want to select the sheet that we'll be working on. Let's check what this sheet temp is. Okay, this has some random values in it, which we do not want. Okay, so yeah, I would like to just bring to your limelight that when you're working with an organization, in an organization, and you get files from a different place or within your organization from a different department, you'll in most of the cases, you'll find that you have like random things written in the data set, right? For example, here we see that we have something called as a temp sheet, which doesn't seem to make any sense, right? Now, this happens because a lot of people in the organizations work on the same workbook, right? Either they work on the same workbook, or somebody must have created this sheet for themselves and forgotten to delete it, or somebody may have merged two sheets for their own convenience. But okay, just wanted to highlight that. But yes, we'll be working on the HR employer raw file. So let's go to transform data. Now, the reason we're going to transform data is because we want to work on Power Query. And that is because we see that there are a lot of null values here, and we don't want these null values. And all of these transformations, for like data cleaning, creating a structure in the data, these things can be done on Power Query. So let's click on transform data. Okay. Right. So we have already gone through the data case, like very briefly. We'll do that here as well. So we see that we have few null values. Another thing is that the DOB and DOJ, which are supposed to be dates, don't really look like dates, right? These are just like random numbers which don't make any sense. Apart from that, yeah, that's pretty much it. So I think in the first look, there are two things that we've identified. First is the null values, and then we're sure that we need to remove the null values. And the second is to change, these numbers to something that is easy to comprehend, or, changing this to a date format. So let's start with deleting the blank rows. To do that, there is an inbuilt option on Power Query. So when we go to remove rows, and then we see remove blank rows. So we just need to click on that, and that removes all the blank rows, right? While if we were to do this on Excel, you would probably have to go to the blank rows and delete each one of them, right? So the second thing is, so before going and changing the format of the date of birth and the date of joining, we also would want to check if this data set has duplicate values, because that is possible, right? To do that, we go to keep rows and keep duplicates. So we see that there are, two values or two employees whose, whose information have been entered twice. So we want to delete this. Also, just want to point out, so now we've identified that we have two duplicate values. Now we want to go back to our data set, right? In order to do that, you just have to cross applied steps from here, and then you'll be back to the data set. Now what we want to do is remove rows, and we want to remove the duplicates. Also, on Power Query, you'll see that on the right-hand side, there is a section called Applied Steps. This window is going to keep an account of all the steps that you perform. All right. So we've done that. We've removed the duplicates. Now we'll move on to changing the format of DOB and DOJ. To do that, we see that here, if you look at this thing, it says 1, 2, 3, which means, and when you click on it, there are various data types available, right? And 1, 2, 3 is actually signifies the data type of a whole number. But a DOB is not really a whole number, right? It is a date. So we're going to change that to date. We're going to do the same for DOJ. Right. Now, Another thing that I want to show you here is one of the most obvious columns which seems to be missing from this data set is the age of the employee. An organization would want to keep a track of the age of the employee, right? To understand where majority of their employees lie. Are they, in the older age bracket, or does the organization have a lot of youngsters, or it's a very like, general age range that is from the 20s to 40s. So this is something that an organization would want to know. So let's try and calculate the age as well. To do that, it's quite simple. You click on DOB, then you go to add column, you go to date, and then you select age. You get a column named age. But when we look at the data type here as well, we see that this is some absurd data type, which definitely does not look like age. So what we'll do is we're going to change the duration to total years. Now, since we don't want ages till I think 8, 9 decimal points, we're just going to change it to whole number. That's how we get the age of the employee. Now, what we want to do next is, so we have cleaned our data set, that is the HR employee data set. But the idea is to create a 9-box grid. And for the 9-box grid, we plot the performance and the potential, which we don't have here currently. So we want to load the performance as well as the potential files onto Power Query. To do that, we go to Home, we go to New Source. Now, if you remember, the performance of the employees were in 3 different files, but in a single folder. So we go to Source, we go to More, we select a folder, we click on Connect. Just a second. We click on Browse. So my data is an a folder named Employee Data, and I want Employee Performance. I click on OK. Okay, so I've got all the 3 sheets in this order that is visible on the screen. Now, the idea is to combine all the 3 sheets and work on them, right? So we'll click on Combine and Transform. Okay. Is my screen visible now? Thank you. All right. So I'll repeat the steps that I've just performed. So yes, as I was saying, we have done the preliminary cleaning on the dataset, that is the HR employee raw file. Now we want to move towards creating a 9-box grid. And as you might remember, that in the 9-box grid, we plot the potential and the performance, which is missing in our dataset currently. So we need to load that to Power Query, right? And if you remember, while we were going through the files, our performance data is in a single folder, but the 3 different years are in 3 different files. So we'll have to load the entire folder to Power Query. Let's see how we can do that. We go to New Source, we go to More, we go to Folder, click on Connect. Then we go to Browse. All my files are in a folder named Employee Data, and I want to load Employee Performance. So I select that and I click on OK. Then I click on OK here as well. Now I have got the 3 files with me. Now I want to combine all the 3 files and then obviously work on them. So I'll click on Combine and Transform Data. We select the sheet and we click on OK. All right. So this is our performance data that has been loaded to Power Query. Now you see a big block of steps here. That is the helper queries and a lot of different file names, which might look intimidating, but you do not have to get intimidated. I'll help you understand what they are. But now let's just have a look on the employee performance data that is currently visible on the screen. All right, so we have the first column is source.name. That is the source name. Because we had 3 different files, performance of 21, 22, and 23. So those are the 3 sources that we have in the first column. The second one is external ID, that is the employee ID. And the third is performance of 2021. I would just like you to, pay a little attention to the column names here. So the third column name is performance of 2021. Here we also see that we have a lot of null values, right? So let's check what these null values are. So if we go down, also, yes, while working on Excel, if you want to get to the end of the data set, you usually would click on, a control and press the down key, and that will take you to the end of data set. But a similar feature is not available on Power Query while working on Power Query. So yeah, just wanted to point that out. So we have to scroll down around to check what these null values are. And here we find that we have a lot of null values. Now, why do you think that is? Okay, so if you see, these null values are for performance of 2022 as well as for the performance of 2023. Now, if you pay attention to the column name, it says performance of 2021. So it's not possible for a column that has values for the performance of 2021 also show the values for performance of 22 and 23. So we'll see how we can solve that. To do that, we use our helper queries, right? So let's go to transform sample file. So this file, this is all these helper queries are a few steps and files that Power Query automatically creates for our convenience. All right. In fact, if you look at the applied steps for transform sample file, you see that there are a few steps that Power Query has done for us, right? So the first is source. The second is navigate. And the third is promoted headers. So if you look at navigate, you see that the column names don't really have names because they're named column 1 and column 2, while the first line, the first row of the data set has the actual headers of the data set, right? And when you see promoted headers, you realize that Power Query has automatically promoted the first row as headers, right? And we don't want to do that. So in order to delete the step, we just click on the cross button and it deletes the step. Also, whatever steps or changes that you make to the transform sample file will be reflected on all the other files. So if we go back to our employee performance, we get an error. To fix the error, we just have to We just have to delete changed type from the applied steps. Now we see that there are no more null values in our data set, right? Now, there are other sheets in the helper queries, for example, the parameter, the sample file, as well as the transform file. So these are just the steps that Power Query is employing to get to the transform sample file. All right. So yeah. So if you look at the sample file, it says, if you look at the formula bar, it says source 0 content. And that is because it goes to the source. Also, yes, Spark query is a zero-based language. So what happens is, in order to choose the first file, so yes, so this typically just signifies that Power Query is choosing the first file from the 3 files that we have. And then it goes to transform file. And if we expand the formula bar, we see that there is some code. This code is written in M language. You don't necessarily have to understand this, but this is just assigning a value and extracting the first sheet from the 3 sheets. The 3 sheets being 21, 22, and 23, the performance of 21, 22, and 23. Okay, let's get back to working on our employee performance. I would like to collapse the formula bar. All right. Now, if we look at this, the first column looks good, but this is not how I would like to present my data, right? And I would have liked it if the first column was named maybe a year and had values like 2021, 22, and 23. That would just make it very easy to comprehend for me, and also for someone else if I were to show the file, in the future. So let's see how we can do that. We select the first column, we right click, and then select add columns from example. Now, what do we want to keep? We just want to keep the years, right? So I enter 2021 and it generates the rest of the values itself. So what I have to do is just click on OK. And I get all the years. Right. All right. Now we don't really require the first column, so we can just delete it. To delete that, you can just right click and remove. Right. Now, you would want to rename the third column as year. To do that, you have to either you can like double click on the column name for the third column, or you can right click and then you can get an option of rename as well. So I'll rename this as year. The second thing, and I would like to have my year at the front. Now, the second thing that I want to do is the second column. Now, the second column should ideally have just my employee ID, right? But it also has these headers written here, as well as like in multiple cells, actually. So I would like to filter that out. To do that, I open the box and I go down, I unselect external ID and I click on OK. Now my data seems good to go, but before that, I would like to change my column names. So let's keep it employee ID and performance text. Since we have the values in text, I've named it as text. Now, what I want to do next is, since we have our years one below the other, and initially, if you remember, I had pointed out that when we plot the performance as well as the potential of employees, we give them an average score. And to find an average score, we would want our scores in different columns for different years. That is adjacent to each other, not one below the other. So to do that, we select the year column, we go to transform, then we go to pivot columns. So this is values column. That is where do we need our values from? So we need our values from the performance text, right? And then we click on OK. But that's weird because this just gives us one everywhere. Let's go back and see what we've done incorrectly. Okay, I'll just delete the step. I'll again select the first column, that is the year, go to pivot columns, select my column value to be, the value column to be performance text. Now, this time I would also explore this advanced option feature. Here we see that the aggregate value function is a count. That is, it is counting the value in the cell. And since there is one value, the output is 1 in all the cells. So, but we don't want that, right? So we'll click on don't aggregate and click on OK. So we get our desired result. Now, also another thing that I would like to highlight here is, if you look at these cells, you'll see a lot of new joinees. Now, these new joinees are the employees that may have just joined or may have joined a few months earlier, and so their performance for the past 3 years is not available, which happens in most of the organizations, right? Because employees keep leaving, or there are new people joining in the organization. All right. So let's get back to what I had highlighted a few seconds back. That is, we need an average of the performance of the last 3 years, right? So to do that, now average can only be found when there are values, right? For example, if you had 1, 2, 3, you can easily find the average of 3 numbers. But here we have text. So in order to find the average, we'll have to assign a particular value to each of these cells or each of these columns. And to do that, we go to add column, we go to conditional column, and it is here that we assign values to each of the years, that is 21, 22, and 23. Now, adding additional column is very similar to the if statement in Excel. So there we have to manually write the formula, that is, if a particular thing is true, then we want the value to be of a specific type, and so on. So we'll do the same here. Let's start with the year 2021. So we will name this as 2021 value, or let's name it as a score. That looks better. Now, if 21 equals, so the first one is, okay, before that, I think I forgot to show you the kind of values we have in all of these columns. So let's quickly check that out. So we have 5 to 6 types of values in column 2021. That is high performer, low performer, meets expectations, meets some expectations, new joinee, and star performer. New joinee obviously is not a type of performance meter or a score or a category, so we can ignore that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the employees in this organization are being rated on a 5-point scale currently, right? Let's look at 2022 as well. So here in the categories look very similar. That is a low, meets expectation, meets some expectation, star, and high. Let's look at 2023. Now the difference here is that there is, in place of meets some expectation, we have a good performer, right? Okay, we would want to keep all of this in mind, but since we'll be writing if statements, this will be required, right? So yeah, let's go to add column, go to conditional column, type in 2021 value. So we go to 2021. So the lowest one is a low performer. So let's give them a score of 1. Add clause 2021 meets some expectations. So while you're entering the values in the value section, you have to be careful about the upper as well as the lower case. You also have to be careful, that you're not entering like more spaces in between the letters or the words. That is one of the disadvantages of additional column on Power Query. Meets expectations. 3. Add clause 2021. Now we have a high performer. Tab 4. And then we have a star performer. I think the spellings look good. Low performer meets some expectations, needs expectations, high performer, and star performer. Let's click on OK and see if we get the result. Right, we have assigned the scores. Now we want 2 more columns for 22 and 23 each. So let's go back to additional column. 2022 value. 2022 equals low performer. So if you remember, the values for 21 and 22 were like very similar. Not like similar, they were the same. So low performer meets some expectations. Then we have meets expectations. Then we have high performer. And then we have star performer. Right. All right, let me just have a look at the spellings again. Meets some expectations, meets expectations. All right. Cool. Let's add the third one. 2023 value. Okay. So 2023, the first one was a low performer. 1. 2022. So if you remember, for 2023, in place of meets some expectations, we had a good performer. And so, yeah, we had 5 values. That is low performer, good performer, meets expectations, high performer, and star performer. But yeah, so I would like to keep the meets expectations lower than a good performer. So yeah, so this entirely depends on the organization. If you want to assign maybe a higher value to meets expectation as compared to a good performer, that's completely your choice. Three. High performer 4. And then the star performer. 5. Good performer, high performer meets. All right. So we have all the 3 values. Now we want to assign weights to this. All right. We don't want to give weightage to all the years equally, right? Maybe I want to consider the performance of the last year, last year of my employees more than I would want to consider their performance in the year 2021. So the kind of weights that I want to assign personally is 50% weight to 2023, 30% to 2022, and for 2021, 20%, right? So here I would like to show you how you can use ChatGPT for this. What you have to do is, just a second. Okay. You go to ChatGPT. And then you write, I have 3 columns for the performance of my employees. These 3 columns are the performance score of the employees in the year 2021, 2022, and 2023 respectively. I want to assign 50%, 30%, and 20% weight to 2023, 2022, and 2021 respectively. Write DAX formula for the same. Let's see if ChatGPT can do this. So this is one of the most common use cases of ChatGPT when it comes to data analytics. That is, you no longer have to manually write down the formula. You can just do that on ChatGPT. But obviously, you need to know how to write formulas, and you should have a good understanding, because ChatGPT is not always right. In fact, there are articles which says that ChatGPT hallucinates, and that is, it sometimes creates measures or columns that don't probably exist. So yeah, just wanted to highlight that. So yeah, if we look at the formula, it has actually done it. Let's see if this formula works. So we copy the code, we go back to Power Query, and now we want to create a custom column. So we go to Add Column, create a custom column. Let's name this column as, just a second, overall performance value.
Neha, your screen is still stuck on ChatGPT.
Okay.
Also, this will be a calculated column, right? This will not be a measure.
Right. So, but I'm using a custom column for this. So I'll just be multiplying like the 3 values.
That's okay.
That,
but
yeah.
But there it said DAX, right? So this is not DAX. Just mention
right.
that this would be an M language, right?
Right. Thank you, sir. Okay. So yeah. So I'm sorry, I forgot to mention this. So previously what we did on ChatGPT was written on DAX, and that is something different from what I am trying to do here. This is a custom column wherein there are different columns available. And since we want to assign the values, we select the first value, that is 2023 value. And then we multiply it by 0.5. Then we want to add this, select another value, 2022 value, multiply this by 0.3. And then we select 2021 and multiply this by 0.20. All right, let's click on OK. Right. So this column gives us the overall performance score of our employees. But we see that we do have a few null values. Let's see what they are. We just need to select the null values. And these are for the new joinees. So if you remember, a few steps back, I had highlighted that there are certain employees for whom the performance is not being tracked or has not been tracked because they've just recently joined the organization. So it's obvious that they will not have a performance score for them. So let's get back to our data set. To do that, we just delete the step. Now, okay. Now we want to divide. So if you remember, we had a 5-point scale, after which we got the average, the score, that is the weighted score. Now we want to get our scores on a 3-point scale, that is low, medium, and high. I just want to highlight this. I know you probably don't get the reason behind it, but you will get it by the end of this session. So let's do it. For that, we will be using a conditional column. Let's select a conditional column. Let's name this as overall performance text. So if our overall performance value
Neha, you'll have to convert the overall performance value into a number before you do this. It's an undefined column, right? ABC 1 to 3.
Right.
Yeah. Not a whole number, a decimal number. Yeah, replace.
Yeah.
There you go.
Right. Thank you, sir. All right. So moving back, getting back to working on this. So if you look at the range of values that we have values from 1 to 5, right? Now we want to divide this into 3 intervals, right? So let's see if we can use ChatGPT for it. So I will type all right. I have a column. I have a column which has values in the range 1 to 5 divided into 3 intervals. Okay, we don't really want a DAX code for it. So
try writing Power Query, Neha.
okay.
Even though these steps would be, suppose they are expected to be complex, right?
Yeah.
So don't expect like really good results from it unless your prompt is very detailed, but you can give it a shot.
Yes. So divide into 3 equal intervals, and
I don't think equal would be the correct way to put it. Maybe you can say into 3 intervals: 0 to 1.9, 2 to 3.9, and then 4 to 5.
Yeah, so actually I'm trying to get these values, that is 2, 3.9 from ChatGPT. So I want it to divide 1 to 5 into like 3 intervals. That is maybe
Okay,
1 to
give it a shot. Let's see what the answer is.
All right. I have 3 columns. I have a column that has values in the range 1 to 5, divided into 3 columns. I do not require a DAX code for the same. Just need the interval range. Yeah, so, all right. Okay, so we see here that ChatGPT has given us like 3 different 3 intervals, and we can use this to divide our values in the column overall performance, to divide it into a low, medium, or a high. So the 2 values that we're going to divide it into are 2 and 3. So one would be if the values are less than 2, the other would be when the values are less than 4, and then after 4, that is between 4 and 5. Let's try and do that. Okay. Let's go to conditional column. Overall performance.
Neha, I can see your ChatGPT screen. Just confirming if maybe you're working on the Power Query screen.
Yes, sir. Thank you for letting me know. Is it visible now?
Yes.
All right, thanks. So yes, so I've named the new column. I want to name it as as overall performance text, because it will be a text value that is low, medium, or high. So we go to column name. We select overall performance value. Now we want to change the operator now, since the first condition would be when the values are equal to or less than 2. Just a minute. Right. Okay. So before we go ahead with this, I just wanted to highlight or bring to your notice again that we had a few null values. Now, these null values will obviously not fall in any of the 3 brackets that we have discussed so far. So we need to filter them out first. Now, whenever you're creating a conditional column and you're taking a value, you're taking the values from a column that has null values, you should always try and filter the null values first, like out, because that seems to create a little bit of a problem if you do it at the end, that is if you use the else statement for it. So the first step that we will be doing is filtering out the null values. To do that we just select the overall performance value. The operator is equal to, so if the overall performance value is equal to a null, then the output should be a null. We add clause, that is overall performance value is less than or equal to 2, and then we keep it as a low of low. We add another clause where we want to keep it less than equal to 4, which would be a medium. And then we add the last clause that is greater than 4, and that would be a high. Okay, this seems right. Let's check if it works. So if we look at all the values, we've got all the values. The nulls are the ones, the people who have currently joined, and they will obviously not have a performance score. Now let's just rename this as, I'm not sure why it didn't pick the name, but we can rename it here. And let's change it to a text value. So before this, I had forgotten to highlight the importance of changing the data type whenever you're working. So it's always beneficial, and it's vital that you define the data types of like the values there are in different columns. All right, okay, so I think this is done. Right. Now we've worked on our employee performance data, and the other parameter that we look at in a 9-box grid is the employee potential. So let's go to home and get our potential data. We select potential of employees. We select the sheet. We select sheet 1 and click on OK. All right. So let's just take a second and go through a data set for the potential of the employees. We have the employee ID, employee name, ability, aspiration, alignment, and agility. So there are 4 parameters, as you can see here: ability, aspiration, alignment, and agility. So potential is a very generic term, right? Now, an organization cannot really track the potential of an employee. To track the potential of an employee, you need to understand what defines the potential of an employee, right? So this organization, the data set of which we're working on, defines the potential of an employee on 4 different parameters. That is the ability, the aspiration, the alignment, and the agility. All right. So we'll be working on these. Also, another interesting thing that you can notice here is the values for the potential in the 4 different parameters range are on a 3-point scale. That is a low, medium, and high. And that is what we've done in the performance. That is what we've done in the performance data set. So here, what we need to do is repeat the steps. That is, convert all these values into numerical form. Let's see how we can do that. We go to add column, conditional column. Now here we type in ability. Ability value. So I'll show you how to do this for one of the parameters. Okay, so yes. So I was saying that I'll show you how you can enter value for one of the parameters, that is ability, so that you're introduced to how you can use this. Even though I've shown it for performance, I'll do this for potential as well. And then I'll just take you quickly through the PPT. I know that this session took a little longer than I had expected, but okay, so without further ado, let's just quickly do this. So we select ability equals. So if the value is a low, we want 1. Similarly, if the value is medium, we want a 2. And if the value is high, we want a 3. All right. Else, it should be a null. But do we really have? But we don't have any value like that, right? So we'll just click on OK. And we get all the values, right? Now, this is a similar process. You need to employ a similar process to get values for aspiration, alignment, and agility as well. After which you'll be calculating the average of all the 4 columns. That is by using, obviously, the custom column feature. That is under add column, you go to custom column. Then you find the average. That is, you add all the 4 values of all 4 columns and divide them by 4. I'll just take you quickly through the PPT that will help you understand all the further steps. Okay, I hope it's visible, the PPT. Okay, thank you. So yeah, so this is what we'll do for aspiration. Okay, just a second. Aspiration, alignment, agility. Then after assigning values to all the 4 columns, we find the average. This is how we do that using the custom column. Then we'll again divide it into low, medium, high, like we did for performance, by defining the different intervals. After which, now now our potential and performance data are in different sheets. If you remember, that is how we were working on Power Query, but we would want them to be on the same sheet, right? So to do that, we'll use merge. Merge is a feature which helps you merge like 2 different sheets. But this is a very common feature in a lot of like languages. For example, SQL, there are left join, inner joins, etc. So you would want to use a left outer join. After merging the 2 sheets, you would click on the expand button, that is this, and then select the the column names that you would want to keep. After you would have like merged both the potential as well as the performance to the employee raw data, you'll have it adjacent to each other, that is, or on the same sheet. Then you would want to create a 9-box category, and to do that you will have to select both the columns, then right click, and then go to add columns from examples. This is something that we've also done previously when we were working on the performance data. After which we'll get something like the 9-box category column that is visible on the screen. Now, since this is a text, we would again want to convert it into a value. To do that, we will be using conditional column, which we have during the session. And you will have to enter the values as is shown on the screen. So after you've done this, after you would have done it, you click on close and apply. That is, so this step marks the end of you structuring the data and working on your data. Now we will move to the visualization part of it. Then we go to the visualization part and we go to insert tab, wherein we insert the shape of a square. Then we make a grid of 9 boxes. Now we need to assign different rules to each of these boxes. I'll show you how you can do that. So if you click on one of these boxes, there are 3 dots that would be visible. You click on the 3 dots and then click on format. When you click on format, on the right hand side of your screen, this window is going to open, which is the format window. You go to shape and then you go to fill. After you go to fill, you go to color, and you see an FX, a box that's named FX, that is to assign a function to it. So after you do that, this window is going to open. There you, for format style, you enter rules. You select rules. The field that you are going to base this on would be the 9-box placement, and the summarization would be first. Then you assign different values to it. That is, if the value is 1, I think this slide will help you better understand that. So if the value is 1, you would want to assign a red color. For 2, a red. Similarly, for 8, 9, and 6, it would be a green. So after you have done this, you would want to add a slicer with the name of the employees. And then whenever you click on one of those names, you will see where your employees lie on the 9-box grid. So that is how you create the 9-box grid. If you have any questions, or now, or even after the session, you can reach out to me. I will be happy to clear them. And I'm sorry I had to rush through during the end of the session, but I'll be sharing the PPT as well as other files with you. So thank you for coming. I hope this session was, helped you learn how to create the 9-box grid. Thank you, Anubhav. All right, I'll be ending the session now. And right after this session ends, within a few minutes, you'll receive the resources. Thanks for joining. Thanks a bit.